I thought, in honor of the theme complications, I would read from a story about a father and daughter, which, for me, is a complication. So the name of the story is Talking Foul with My Father. It's split into 3 sections. I will read most of the first 2 sections. Talking Foul with My Father. 1. Turkey, a circular argument. My father wants to know what I had for lunch today. I haven't called in months, but this is what interests him. I had a turkey sandwich, I say. Turkey, he says with clear disgust. Last year, my father's doctor gave him a list of safe foods. Foods recommended for someone in my father's condition. Turkey was high on the list. My father's never liked turkey, except at Thanksgiving, and only then because it comes with all sorts of things that he does like. Fatty skin swaddled in strips of bacon, mashed potatoes, gravy, rolls and butter, ham, yes, ham. My father has always managed to treat turkey as the annoying but harmless relative who shows up once a year on the holiday. But now turkey has become my father's enemy. Of course, he has numerous reasons for not liking turkey, first among them being that he likes beef. And while this might not seem like a reason, it is what my father tells me whenever I ask him why he doesn't like turkey. Because I like beef, he says. It's not an either-or question. I say it's like salt and pepper. You can like both of them. Now, if turkey and beef are sitting in a room alone and someone says, you can pick only one thing from the room, okay. Then it's true you can have turkey or you can have beef. But this isn't like that. Geraldine and I just spent our 10th anniversary in Greece. 2 blissful weeks, walking where Plato and Socrates once walked. Both of us nearly in tears at the thought of it. And here I am, 1 month later, having this conversation. Reason number 2, because it is on his list. Reason number 3, because my baby brother, whom he considers henpecked, eats turkey and some guys or other for dinner every night. Or so my father claims. The one time that Geraldine and I visited my brother and his wife at their overly child-proofed house in the suburb of the Twin Cities, the 4 of us and their 5 children ate lunch together, turkey sloppy joes for the record, while discussing the pros and cons of my brother's retirement plan. As he spoke, he stared at Geraldine as though he couldn't quite figure out who she was or how she had come to be sitting at his wood veneer table. His wife, whom I was meeting for the first and what would turn out to be the only time, said very little during the meal, but when I reached for the water pitcher, she noticed my raggedy fingernails and broke her silence to announce bitterly that my brother chewed not just his fingernails, but his toenails as well. Addressing her complaint specifically to me as though this were some sort of Lindquist family conspiracy for which I was equally answerable. Geraldine and I flew back to San Francisco that evening, and when I called my father several weeks later to tell him that we had made it home safely, the first thing he wanted to know was what my sister-in-law had served for lunch. Sloppy joes, I told him, and there was a short pause of disappointment before my father, who's never cooked anything in his life, replied triumphantly, "I'll bet they were turkey. You know, all she gives him is turkey." It is worth noting that the 2 parts of my father's argument regarding the state of my brother's diet and marriage are interchangeable. They both can and do function as conclusion or premise, depending on what we are arguing about. Whether my father is trying to convince me that my brother does eat turkey every day, or that he is, indeed, henpecked. Argument A. My brother is henpecked because he eats turkey every day. In this argument, my father is demonstrating that my brother is henpecked, and so the daily eating of turkey becomes his first and only premise, one that he nonetheless shores up amply. Turkey breasts, burgers, chili, lasagna, everything is turkey with her. Argument B, because my brother is henpecked, he eats turkey every day. Occasionally one of us, usually me, but sometimes my sister, will be foolish enough to suggest that our brother does not eat turkey every single day. My father, in this case, cites as proof the fact that my brother is henpecked. His argument succinct and unshakable. Of course he does. She doesn't even let him wipe his own ass. 2. Roasted chicken, a study in semantics. The cafe in Fentonville has 2 roasted chicken specials, my father begins the conversation, not bothering with more standard pleasantries. Mashed potatoes, a roll with butter, gravy, some kind of vegetable or other. It is as though he is reading love poetry over the phone, his voice greedy and helpless. I try to recall what roasted chicken is, how it differs from roasted chicken, what the addition of the B actually means. But the word has been dropped into the conversation with such ease that I know I cannot ask him to explain. Roasted chicken, he would reply automatically. The words so familiar to him that they are their own definition. Then, after the slightest pause, he would say it again, roasted chicken, asserting the words in a way that means both, you never visit, and what kind of world do you live in? It is true that I visit infrequently, once every 3 or 4 years, just as it is true that I live in a world devoid of roasted chicken. Which is not to say that there are no roasted chickens in San Francisco. Of course there are. There would have to be. Sometimes when I have not called my father in a particularly long time, he will begin the conversation by announcing, a lot has changed. Then he will proceed to fill me in on events that happened years ago, as a way of making clear my neglectfulness. Your sister got married, he will say. And my sister has been married for 7 years and has 2 boys. All little fellows who refuse to speak to me on the telephone because they are busy cutting. Each boy has his own cutting box, a cigar box in which he keeps a pair of blunt-ended scissors and his most recent clippings, advertisements for cereal and batteries, as well as carefully snipped photos of dead duck and elk from his father's hunting magazines. When I ask to speak to them, my sister holds up the receiver and I hear Trevor, who just turned 6, saying, tell her to call when we're not cutting. All they do is cut, my father complains. My sisters told me that they are afraid of my father, afraid of his largeness, of the way that his feet seem poured into his shoes, the flesh straining against the laces so that they can no longer be tied. They are afraid of the way that he falls asleep talking and then awakens with a start a moment later, screaming, what, when they have said nothing, because anger has become his most immediate response. I doubt you'd even recognize this place, my father says at other times, referring to Morton, the town where I grew up, the town where he has always lived, except for a brief period just after high school, when the Army borrowed him. This was in 1945, at the very end of the war, which was over before he got any farther away than Florida. But something about this experience put him off of the world, and nerved him so much that he forgot about college and went immediately back to Morton, picking up where he had left off, helping my grandfather run his hardware store, and eventually taking it over himself. He continued to read, preferring characters to actual people, and maintained an extensive library which he housed in our basement, choosing the only room that was windowless, as though having so many books were something best kept secret. Still, the world outside worked its way in, entering through small fissures in the house's foundation, grew larger over time, filling our basement with water. Spring was particularly insidious, for as the snow outside slowly melted, the water level rose within, gradually, as though a tap had been turned on somewhere within the bowels of the house, a tap that none of us could locate, left open to a small but unstoppable trickle. For many years it was our job, my siblings and mine, to mop up the standing water. But as we got older, we procrastinated a bit more each time, until finally our parents grew tired of our laziness, tired of their own nagging, and laid down thick carpeting throughout the entire basement, a cheap urine-colored shag that they said would act as a giant sponge. And in this way, our basement was turned over to the mold. Throughout my childhood, I liked my father's library better than any other room in the house, liked the moldy smell of books that hung in the air and clung to my clothing. In fact, I considered this the natural odor of books and wondered, each time I checked out a book from the school library, what they had done wrong that caused their books to smell as they did, of paper and ink and the sweatiness of children's hands. My father proceeds to give me an oral tour of Morton over the phone, block by block, resident by resident, as though proving my absence to me. We've got Amish now, he tells me. Dan Klimak's got them working out at the cardboard plant he put in just east of town. But when I ask who Dan Klimak is, my father uses the voice that he would use to explain roasted chicken to me if I were foolish enough to ask. Danny Klimak, of course you know Danny Klimak, he says, his voice startled and angry, the syllables like waves beating frantically against the shore. This is a metaphor that would make no sense to my father, for he has lived his life surrounded by lakes and ponds, placid bodies of water whose waves do not beat or pound or crash, but rather lap gently at the shore, a steady, soothing sound, like that of a cat drinking milk. Thank you.